Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. On Fridays, we talk about the product owner role in Scrum. We talk about patterns and anti-patterns that relate to ours and the team's collaboration with the product owner. And we've also put together a course to help you navigate that relationship. There's 18 modules, nearly 8 hours of tools, techniques, videos, handouts, presentations you can use to help you and your team work better with your product owner. The course is available at bit.ly/coachyourPO. All lowercase, all one word, that's bit.ly/coachyourPO. And now, on to the show, the Product Owner Show. Hello everybody, welcome to our TGIF, the Product Owner episode, this week with Jesse Houwing. Hi Jesse, welcome back.
Hello.
So on Fridays we talk about product owners because we want to learn, of course, how to help product owners and ultimately how to help the teams and the companies we work with succeed. So let's start first with a bad example and then kind of discuss that a little bit, understand what we could do when we meet that anti-pattern in real life. Then we'll talk about a good example. But let's start with that first, Jesse. Share with us what might have been potentially the worst product owner anti-pattern you've witnessed.
The worst product owner anti-pattern I see is a product owner that isn't really able to make up their mind about what it is that they want. So the worst thing I had was it was the same organization we talked about before. We had 17 teams. We had 17 backlogs. We had 17 objectives. Each team had their own thing that they were trying to accomplish, but they also had to work together. So these product owners, these 17 people, which is already too many people in order to going to be effective, and they would come together in their product owner meet 2 times a week, and that they would discuss the dependencies that they thought that their teams were having, and they were trying to try to write the stories in their product backlog items in such a way that the teams would be able to deliver, and then in the end, when everything came together, everything would work.
So they were kind of breaking stuff down into the teams before the teams were involved. Is that so?
Yeah, because the teams, of course, were very busy and had enough trouble to deal with. So they were trying to kind of make it easier for the teams. At the same time, they were making it a lot harder for the teams. So this is a very interesting kind of situation. And the worst thing that happened kind of there was that they completed their large planning event where they were trying to kind of align among the teams together what they were going to do. And the CTO walked in, looked at all of the objectives and the things that people were going to be doing, and he said, well, I see that this important item that I really, really need to get done this quarter is not going to get picked up by any of the teams. Everybody kind of looked at them. Nope. We looked at our backlogs, but we had kind of already decided what we were going to do, and that was not part of what we were planning to do, so we didn't pick it up. So he said, well, it needs to get done anyway.
Whoops.
And kind of left it at that. But kind of all the other 17 things had to get done anyway as well. Looking at the statistics so far, it had been that about the period before when you kind of had the same problem, and we started to coach people on that, they had delivered kind of 5% of their intended objectives. So now they were trying to deliver both the objectives of the last a couple of months that they'd been working on, plus the objectives of that they kind of now were committing to. And then the CTO kind of walked in and said, I want objective 18 to be delivered as well. So we kind of said, if that's really the most important thing, then you need to make sure it becomes that 5%, because likely it's not going to get delivered at all if you don't make it that.
Indeed.
But it became really interesting. And what we really kind of saw was that each of these product owners had their own metrics and had their own sets of success criteria and had their own team. They were trying to set their own teams up for success, but they weren't really looking at the bigger picture. And they had lots of overlapping scope between them. So, and in many cases, there were also dependencies and required collaborations between these people and their teams. And by not really having those conversations, it became really, really hard to kind of get anything done. And that was the hardest part. People were delivering things, but nothing was getting done.
So in this PO is kind of a system PO, right? It's not one person, but it's these
It's a whole group
17
of bad
people
product owners.
who can't who can't make up their mind because there's so many things that are even perhaps contradictory that they need to work on.
Yeah.
Well, that must be tough. So in the companies that you work right now, and of course with the benefit of hindsight, which is 2020, what do you try to do to bring these different POs together and avoid this kind of situation?
So step one is try not to have 17 product owners for 17 teams. That was big mistake number one. We knew that as when I came in, they already had 17 product owners and they had already kind of identified it was a problem. But by that time, they had already made it a HR function as well. So people weren't just having the role as product owner, but their job title had become product owner and their career path was product owner. So actually then saying that you didn't need 16 of them or maybe 12 of them was kind of HR technically very, very hard in that organization. So that was a big problem that we encountered. But well, I always teach from a Nexus and a skilled professional Scrum perspective that for every product we've got one product owner, and it starts so by identifying what your product is. And in our case, in the organization that I worked with, their definition of product was just all over the place. For some people, it was the back end because they serviced the help desk. For some people, it was the website. For some people, it was the mobile app. For some people, it was kind of one of the financial products that they were delivering. And then once we started to kind of follow those little trails, we had people like the sales manager was directly working with a couple of product owners kind of to make cross-sell and upsell possible. And we had the support manager, kind of the COO working with the help desk manager, working on enabling the internal processes, make the internal processes better. But there were all these kind of little side steering things where all of these different product owners got different priorities and different visions and different things of what it is that they were trying to accomplish. They were really missing kind of this is what we are building together and this is what we're trying to achieve, and then kind of being able to derive the underlying work from that. And it turned out that everybody had kind of their own political ambitions as well.
Of course, because when you have 17 people, it's impossible not to have that kind of
you've got 17
aspect.
people and then kind of the management structure above 17 people. So it was really interesting kind of to see. So we really started by visualizing the work and visualizing the dependencies, and by not allocating work to teams many sprints ahead, and then by starting to see if we could restructure some of the teams, make them more cross-functional. Didn't help that they were working with multiple third-party vendors and that for some pieces of code, they weren't allowed to see each other's code. So even if you try to create a cross-functional team out of it, they weren't able to look at each other's screens, for example. So the contracts of how people were working with each other had to be changed as well. It was a very, very kind of big change once we started on it. And one of the other things that we started to do was to visualize the objectives and the progress of the objectives over visualizing the teams and what the teams were working on. So similarly, as in many teams, you start to change kind of your daily Scrum from what have you been doing and what have you been doing into this is the most important thing, who's working on that. We changed kind of the way that we visualized the program boards as well, from not these teams and these sprints, but this work and who's working on that and what are the dependencies within that. And that started to kind of visualize that many teams were working on many different objectives together with many different dependencies at the same time. So once we started to visualize these are the most important things in progress, and then seeing which teams can contribute to that, and then try to not have those teams work on anything else as they were trying to kind of battle the dependencies within the most important thing. That was a very big eye opener. And even though it started to look a lot more like mini projects, big epics or big things that they were trying to change within their big products, it also started to help figure out kind of what groups of people we regularly needed to work together. So that started to drive kind of towards a better team structure as well. Of naturally, people fit together.
And I think that the story of like organizing differently and then having the product owner in this case function, because it's a very large organization, kind of having the product owner function as part of defining and designing this new, in this case, tracking and understanding of the work, like you said, visualizing the work instead of visualizing what the teams are working on, rather who is working on this piece of work rather than what is this team working on. Like this, that perspective kind of helps to evolve the product owner function, and it also illustrates how important it is to have the way you manage the work directly linked to the way you define the work, right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see how many practices are kind of based, especially around visualization. If you take the SAFe program board, for example, which is teams over sprints, that's a great starting point for teams that are having a problem of visualizing dependencies within teams, as long as they have focus. Kind of, if they're all working on the same thing, then that board provides value. If they're not all working on that same thing, that board become one big kind of muddy ball of spaghetti. And I often see teams then looking at it and just smiling at the end of a 2-day event, and just looking at the board, and they're like, oh, look, we made all of these dependencies visible, and now that they're visible, we're not going to have any problems with them. And I'm like, no, this was just a starting point. Now that you've made all of these dependencies visible, let's see if there is any way that we can redefine the work, break down the work, change kind of the composition of the teams in order to take the dependencies away, or at least kind of bring them all within the same composition of people.
Exactly.
But if you have product owners owning teams, and those people kind of, they are my people, and if your team kind of, your team member gets taken away as a product owner, you're able to deliver less to the organization because you've got fewer people at your kind of disposal, which sounds really awful, but that's often how they feel about it. What kind of also means that these product owners, it's their team, it's their people, they are working for them to deliver their items of the product backlog.
Yeah, that's actually another anti-pattern for the product owner, right? It's instead of focusing on the value, they focus on the quantity of things they can get done.
Yeah.
All right. So, Jesse, we do need to move on to the next question. And we did talk a lot about anti-patterns. So let's end up on a high and talk about what might have been potentially the best product owner example you've worked with.
So the best product owner I worked with was a product owner who was very open to being coached. And he came in, we started with the ambition of delivering software faster. And they were on a delivery of once every 3 months when we started with the coaching kind of back and forth together. And and he asked me, so I want to deliver at least once every month. And I said, oh, nice. So then the aim that we're going to have is to deliver every week. He said, no, I want to deliver every month. I said, yes. And if we want to be able to kind of consistently deliver every month, we need to learn how to deliver every week. Because if anything kind of gets messed up in that month, then at least we've got 2 weeks to fix that. That was kind of the idea behind it. And in that organization, we really needed that. So the aim was to deliver kind of at least every week. And then if we could deliver kind of 3 potentially shippable increments or 4 potentially shippable increments in the month, then we'd have at least kind of there would only be a 25% risk of not delivering anything. And it was kind of his biggest fear, not being able to deliver anything. And so after lots of conversations, we got to the point where he agreed with me on that. And later on, he came back to me and said, so we managed to be able to do it. And interestingly enough, we're actually now able to deliver every week quite consistently. And I'm seeing all of the value that brings to me, kind of being able to get more feedback and being able to measure kind of the response in production, being able to kind of stop working on some things much, much earlier. I want to deliver faster. I want to be able to deliver at least twice a week. And he looked at me. And now you're probably going to say that if I want to deliver twice a week, I need to be able to deliver daily. And I was just smiling. And I said, yep, probably. If you want to be able to consistently ship twice a week, you need to figure out how to ship at least daily. And once you get beyond that point, it doesn't matter anymore, because then kind of you've got all your processes and techniques with your team set up in such a way that it doesn't matter anymore, that you can ship whenever you want. And basically that is really what you want to strive towards. But kind of the thing that we kind of worked out together is that usually if you want to be able to achieve something, you should aim for something slightly beyond that point. Because if you're just aiming for being able to do exactly what you want, kind of statistically speaking, the chances of kind of hitting that mark consistently is kind of statistically still slim. But kind of if you aim slightly beyond that, the chances going to become much higher quite quickly. And it was a very kind of fun collaboration to work with, and he got all of the benefits out of being able to deliver much faster. And the way that we worked together, the kind of was that we would just have long walks around kind of the office park, and we just have kind of conversations around it. And then he would actually try to implement many of those things himself. And he would only come by after he said, I tried all of these things and it's still not working. Can we have a walk? And then we'd have a walk and we'd have a back and forth, and we'd have a whole couple of discussions. But he really wanted to make the change himself. I think that's one of the best.
Yeah, and actually that's an aspect of this, the kind of perhaps implicit in what you're describing is that this product owner was not just interested in delivering value, he was interested in helping the team and all of the necessary auxiliary processes and tools evolve to deliver value.
Oh yeah, because for him it became so obvious that all of those things were in the way of him being able to do his job properly.
Yeah.
And once we got beyond that point, he just kept on finding new problems that we could try and resolve together. And in this case, it's really interesting because if you think about it, the way that he attacked many of those things, he was product owner and Scrum Master at the same time. He was changing the organization around him because the Scrum Master on his team was the senior tester on the team who also happened to be Scrum Master, who didn't really have the ability in the organization to make those big changes happen. So usually we coach people against mixing the role of product owner and Scrum Master, but in some cases, if your product owner is just way up in the organization kind of compared to the Scrum Master, sometimes they'll just be able to make a lot of those things happen much faster. And because they are in line with what they want, kind of as a product owner, there's also not really any conflict involved as well. So it became very kind of, that was a very fun kind of working together kind of relationship that we had. I still like kind of walking around once in a while and just hearing the stories of kind of how this is progressing and kind of the how things have been improving over time.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great story. Jesse, we're getting close to the end, but before we do share with us, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
The easiest way to find more about me is on my profile page on xspirit.com/Jesse. If you open that, you'll find kind of all of my social media links and my GitHub link and my Twitter and my Facebook. I am trying to reduce my social media interaction. So the best way to reach me is probably still by social media, but I prefer just a little contact over WhatsApp and make it really personal. And that's probably the easiest way.
All right. And we'll put the link on the show notes. So do send that to me so I can add it to the show notes. Jesse, it's been a pleasure. Really great week of episodes. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
And thank you very much for inviting me.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.